Today, the Matt Walsh Show, the DailyWire uncovers a massive scandal at FEMA, where an official in the agency directed relief workers to skip houses with Trump signs out front. Also, Trump begins staffing his next administration. His choices so far give us plenty of reasons for optimism. And scorned Kamala voters are now cutting off their Trump-supporting family members. We'll talk about all that and more today on the Matt Walsh Show. Am I Racist smashed records in theaters as the decade's #1 documentary, and now it's streaming only on DailyWire Plus with exclusive extras. Want to see it all? A DailyWire Plus membership is your ticket. Sign up at dailywire.com/subscribe and use code TRUMP to get 47% off a new annual membership. With Christmas around the corner, let me tell you about the one gift that will actually be worth giving this year. No cheap plastic junk that'll end up in a landfill by February. I'm talking about Cozy Earth, which has become my family's go-to for creating an actual sanctuary in our home. Look, after spending all day fighting the culture war and dealing with the insanity of modern society, you need somewhere to retreat and actually get some rest. And that's why I personally love Cozy Earth's bamboo sheet set. Made from viscose from bamboo, these sheets are engineered to keep you several degrees cooler at night. And unlike most products today that seem designed to fall apart, these are guaranteed for 10 years. My wife and I have also become huge fans of their pajama sets. When you're finally done dealing with the world for the day, there's nothing better than changing into something that's actually built for comfort and quality. If I seem like a cozy pajama type of guy, you're right, I am. Here's what you need to do. Visit cozyearth.com/Matt Walsh and use my exclusive code Matt Walsh for 40% off to wrap your family in actual luxury this Christmas season. That's cozyearth.com/Matt Walsh and use code Matt Walsh for 40% off. And when you get the post-purchase survey, make sure to let them know you heard about it on the Matt Walsh Show. A month before the presidential election, the people running FEMA decided to venture outside the field of disaster relief and into the completely unrelated, if very trendy, business of policing, quote-unquote, disinformation. And of course, policing disinformation isn't what FEMA is paid to do. It's not why FEMA receives tens of billions of dollars every year from taxpayers. But in this case, the agency determined that it had no other choice. Disinformation, in the eyes of the Federal Emergency Management Agency, had become its own kind of emergency. It was a disaster unto itself. Now, to that end, FEMA's director, a woman named Deanne Criswell, who incidentally broke the glass ceiling to become the first woman to head the agency, announced that FEMA would be conducting a thorough investigation to, quote, uncover the source of conspiracy theories hampering Hurricane Helene relief efforts. Now, among those conspiracy theories were that FEMA was directing funding to illegal immigrants and that FEMA was withholding assistance to certain demographic groups. As Criswell put it, quote, it's really unfortunate that we try to create this level of fear that is impeding our ability to do our job at the level we need to do it. Now, even if these were baseless conspiracy theories, it was never explained how they could be hampering hurricane relief efforts. I mean, how would kooky internet theories prevent you from helping people whose houses were washed away in a flood exactly? She never bothered to explain that. But more importantly, it turns out that the theories, of course, were true. Almost immediately, it became very clear that FEMA was indeed overseeing the distribution of hundreds of millions of dollars to house illegal aliens. That was kind of difficult to deny since there was a paper trail. So that's one conspiracy theory that was proven true right off the bat, as so many others have been. But the media in this country and all over the world continue to maintain that, contrary to what Donald Trump and those deranged MAGA Republicans were saying, no disaster relief was being withheld based on demographics or political views. And they were very, very clear on that point. Watch.
Even with all eyes now on Milton, it's the fallout from Helene that suddenly caught up in the ever more ugly U.S. presidential election.
Kamala Harris has left them stranded. This is the worst response to a storm or a catastrophe or a hurricane that we've ever seen, ever.
On that, Donald Trump supporters cheered, but fact checkers had a field day, labeling Trump's claims Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have failed to properly aid those hit hard by Helene as demonstrably false.
It's un-American.
Biden, in turn, slamming Trump for politicizing Helene's damage and harming Americans in need.
But it misleads people. It puts people in circumstances where they panic.
Donald Trump has repeatedly stated falsehoods about the federal response to hurricane relief efforts, and officials say that's creating fear and it's also demoralizing aid workers. In the aftermath of Helene, Trump claimed without evidence that the federal government was intentionally withholding aid to people living in Republican areas.
So this is the moralizing tone that we're all very familiar with at this point. The media wags its fingers at Donald Trump for saying something supposedly without evidence. They cited the vaunted fact checkers who have already looked into the situation, and then they imply that you're a moron if you come to the conclusion that FEMA would ever, in its wildest dreams, shortchange American citizens who urgently need emergency assistance. We're supposed to believe that FEMA would never do such a thing, unless the year is 2005 and a Republican's in the White House, in which case FEMA desperately wants to kill as many black people as possible. Other than that, FEMA is the gold standard. Any suggestion to the contrary is simply misinformation. To give one more example, The Atlantic dismissed the, quote, rumors alleging that FEMA was abandoning Trump voters after Helene. These claims, we were told, were misinformation. And when the media was making these claims about FEMA, it's true that there wasn't a written document from FEMA that explicitly stated, don't help Trump supporters. But there was still a lot of evidence to back up what Trump was saying. For one thing, there were many reports from residents in North Carolina and Florida that FEMA wasn't helping them, as I covered on the show at the time. Then Congressman Corey Mills reported that the federal government was preventing civilian rescue pilots and aid workers from saving lives in the aftermath of Helene in order to supposedly clear airspace for Air Force One. And then a SpaceX engineer who was assisting rescue efforts on the ground in North Carolina stated that, quote, FEMA is actively blocking shipments and seizing goods and services locally and locking them away. It's very real and scary how much they have taken control to stop people helping. We are blocked now on the shipments of new Starlinks coming in until we get an escort from the fire department, but that may not be enough. Now, after these reports came out, the media and the federal government obviously should have begun a full investigation about what exactly FEMA was doing. If they actually cared about the lives of Republicans living in disaster areas, they wouldn't sit back and lecture us about misinformation and claim that we're, saying things without evidence. They'd acknowledge that there is a lot of very concerning evidence, and they would look into the details, but they didn't do that. Instead, they scolded us for thinking that FEMA would even consider the possibility of withholding assistance from Trump voters who had just been hit by a hurricane. So it fell to the DailyWire to break the story on Friday that, in fact, FEMA had systematically refused to provide disaster relief to Trump voters in the aftermath of Helene, and had done so explicitly because they're Trump voters. And not just that, a FEMA official had put the plan in writing as clearly and as unambiguously as possible. I mean, this is behavior that's so obscene and so malicious that even given everything we know about the Biden-Harris administration, a lot of people still assumed it couldn't possibly be real. But it is real. And if you or someone you know needs a wake-up call about how far Democrats in the federal government will go in order to punish Americans who don't agree with them, well, here it is. This is that moment. As the Daily Wire's Leaflet Mayhew reported, quote, a FEMA supervisor told workers in a message to avoid homes advertising Trump as they canvassed Lake Placid, Florida to identify residents who could qualify for federal aid, internal messages viewed by the Daily Wire reveal. The supervisor, Marnie Washington, relayed this message both verbally and in a group chat used by the relief team, multiple government employees told the Daily Wire. Now, here's a screenshot of one of the written messages. It reads, quote, implement best practices. No one goes anywhere alone. Avoid homes advertising Trump. Practice de-escalation and preventative measures. Bring a towel with you in the field. Frequent breaks and drink water. Avoid high-salt diets and coffee. So the instructions to avoid homes with Trump signs is just kind of casually thrown in there along with basic tips for people who are conducting relief operations in a disaster zone. It wasn't some special secretive directive. It apparently felt completely natural to a FEMA supervisor to put something like this in writing just casually in a list along with other tips. And to be clear, this wasn't some extremely dumb joke or a prank or something. This is not Photoshop or whatever. This is not any of that. It's 100% confirmed. The Daily Wire's reporting continues. The government employees told the Daily Wire that at least 20 homes with Trump signs or flags were skipped from the end of October and into November due to the guidance, meaning they were not given the opportunity to qualify for FEMA assistance. Images shared with the Daily Wire show that houses were skipped over by the workers who wrote in the government system messages such as, Trump sign, no entry per leadership. Yes, that's actually what the FEMA employees wrote in the notes section when they were documenting what was happening. And this is what that looked like in the government systems. You can see it there. So it says, not able to access property, implying that the house was physically inaccessible. And then the note clarifies that actually they were able to access the property, they just didn't want to. And yes, that's something that a government employee put in writing in a fully traceable and internally accessible database, which is like a bank robber passing a note to the teller saying, put all the money in the bag, and by the way, here's my home address, my license plate, and my legal name. Within hours of the Daily Wire's reporting, this FEMA supervisor was fired, and this time around, FEMA's director wasn't wagging her finger at right-wing disinformation. She didn't tell us how unfortunate it was that we were spreading fear. Instead, this time she claimed that the supervisor's behavior was extremely unusual, unthinkable at FEMA. Quote, recently, one FEMA employee departed from these values to advise her survivor assistance team to not go to homes with yard signs supporting President-elect Trump. This is a clear violation of FEMA's core values and principles to help people regardless of their political affiliation. This was reprehensible. I want to be clear to all of my employees and the American people. This type of behavior and action will not be tolerated at FEMA. We will hold people accountable if they violate these standards of conduct. This employee has been terminated, and we have referred the matter to the Office of Special Counsel. I will continue to do everything I can to make sure this never happens again. Now, what's not addressed in the FEMA director's statement is why she thinks this kind of behavior is confined to one FEMA employee. She's trying to play this off as an isolated incident when it clearly isn't one. Again, this official gave these instructions multiple times, verbally and in writing. And the fact that she would say this, much less put it in writing, tells us quite a bit about the culture at the agency. Because it seems to me that if helping people, regardless of their political affiliation, really were the core values and principles of FEMA, this supervisor would not have felt comfortable giving those kinds of instructions. This is the kind of thing that only happens when the entire agency is corrupted. Think about what happened ahead of Trump's election in 2016. There were multiple high-ranking FBI officials texting each other on company phones about how they'd try to prevent Trump from becoming president. In August 2016, an FBI lawyer texted the head of the agency's counterintelligence division, who incidentally was her lover at the time, quote, Trump's not ever going to become president, right? Right? And he replied, no, he won't. We'll stop it. And then they talked about an insurance policy in case Trump was elected. Again, the FBI's top expert in counterintelligence was using an FBI-issued phone to say stuff like this. That's the kind of thing that only happens when you're very confident the FBI wouldn't care if they found out what you're saying because they agree with you. It wasn't one or two bad eggs at the FBI. The whole agency was compromised. Now, there's every reason to think that the same principle applies to FEMA. At the highest levels, FEMA went on the warpath against right-wing disinformation just a month ago. And just a few weeks later, all of that alleged disinformation has turned out to be true. So how about we just stop insulting everyone's intelligence and admit what everybody knows, which is that FEMA, like pretty much every other federal agency, probably voted for Kamala Harris by a 9-1 margin. And like every other government agency that's overrun with left-wing activists, it's not simply incompetent. It's an active danger to the well-being of half the country. This is why Elon Musk's plan to gut the federal bureaucracy isn't just about cost savings. It's about stopping these lunatics before they get more people killed. Now, it's also about hiring people who aren't crazy and unstable. The New York Post did some digging on this FEMA supervisor's social media feeds, and here's what they found. Quote, the former FEMA employee has a strong fixation with the history of slavery. She posted on her Facebook page in 2019 about supposedly the first slave ship to travel to the America in the 1500s, as well as an article about how California tried to ban free black individuals in the mid-1800s. I'm steadfast and extremely unpredictable. she wrote on her social media page, adding a kiss emoji. So she's, that's what you want from someone who's running a disaster relief. That's what you want from a government, a bureaucrat running disaster relief. If they describe themselves as extremely unpredictable. Yeah, that's a quality you're looking for. But no, she's not just extremely, she's steadfast and extremely unpredictable. Which seems to me to be like a contradiction in terms. And she's also obsessed with slavery, apparently to the point where she wanted some payback against all those MAGA Republicans. Maybe that was her motivation, who knows? And just on this basis alone, there's no universe in which somebody like this should be employed at taxpayer expense. We simply can't continue hiring barely literate left-wing activists anymore. Maybe it's time to take background checks and interviews a little more seriously in order to make sure that we never hire one of these morons again, especially when they're using kiss emojis on Facebook, which is independently disqualifying. Now, in the meantime, for starters, FEMA's director needs to go. And I would hope that'd be one of the first things to happen when Trump takes office. And this employee should not just be fired, but prosecuted. Now, you can't lock up pro-lifers for praying and then look the other way when a government official refuses to assist storm victims because they support Trump. And then we need a full accounting for all the other ways that FEMA and other government agencies sabotage the interests of American citizens under the Biden-Harris administration. If they're willing to basically write, "We won't help Trump supporters," I mean, not basically write that, but that's what they wrote, and put that in a government database, you could just imagine what a thorough investigation would probably uncover. At this point, it wouldn't be unthinkable to discover the FBI was, writing notes about how they have to arrest as many pro-lifers as possible as revenge for Roe being overturned. Or the Department of Education is telling teachers to make students dumb and illiterate so that one day they might seriously consider voting for a candidate like Kamala Harris. I mean, nothing's off the table, given what we've seen so far. The federal bureaucracy is at war with the citizens who pay their salaries. And a lot of well-intentioned Americans have dutifully paid those salaries over the years on the assumption that these bureaucrats were public servants that they could count on when necessary. But if that was ever true, it's not true anymore. Overwhelmingly, federal bureaucrats are servants of the Democrat Party, which demands unwavering loyalty, and as we have seen, tolerates no dissent. They're willing to call you liars for pointing out what they know they're doing. They're willing to go into storm-ravaged neighborhoods and tell Trump supporters that they're on their own. And that's why when the next administration starts, all of these bureaucrats will be on their own. Americans aren't going to rush to their defense when the cuts begin. When these bureaucrats go to court to save their jobs in the inevitable wave of lawsuits, nobody's going to support them. There will be broad support for eliminating civil service protections. Everyone understands that a bureaucracy that doesn't serve its citizens and that goes out of its way to harm its citizens has no reason to exist. Actually, there's at least one exception to that generalization. The corporate press believes that the job of the government is to punish its own citizens for wrong things. So they're doing everything they can to resist the destruction of the deep state. And that's now very clear as well. Last night, a reporter for NBC News had a complete meltdown over the DailyWire's reporting. And this reporter, a woman named Myrna Al-Sarif, wrote a story about the DailyWire's coverage that failed to name the FEMA employee in question and also implied that we don't know when and where this incident occurred. But we do have all those details. They're mentioned in the Daily Wire story. Of course, the reporter, who has pronouns in her bio, of course, doesn't mention the Daily Wire in her piece, nor does she cite us. But she's clearly read the reporting because we're the ones who broke the story in the first place. And then when the Daily Wire's editor, Brent Scher, pointed out all of these problems to Myrna, she went on a bizarre tirade lashing out at everybody who interacted with her. For example, and this is, again, a reporter for NBC, she wrote, quote, "Sorry, Brent Scher, are your feelings hurt because I didn't link to the Daily Wire story? Stay mad." Then when someone pointed out that she was acting like a hack, Myrna wrote, quote, "The hack is your mama." She went on to call somebody the B word and then declared, "I get my info from official sources." In other words, she's not going to look at the screenshots from FEMA's database because they weren't included in the FEMA press release. Therefore, she won't mention them. And then after a bunch of people pointed out that she was acting completely unhinged, she called Brent Scher a troll and then deleted her X account entirely. Now, you can choose to interpret all this as the late-night psychotic breakdown of a potentially intoxicated NBC News journalist. But the truth is, NBC News, like FEMA, goes out of its way to hire people like this. They want people who are dishonest, unintelligent, unhinged, unstable. They're willing to tolerate all of those characteristics as long as these people also hate Republicans with a passion. That is the one quality they screen for at NBC News, and it's the one quality they screen for in the federal government, up until now. Put another way, the federal bureaucracy is a leviathan that has expanded to the point that it has no shame, no self-awareness, no competence, no integrity. It has only a deep and abiding disdain for tens of millions of Americans. Disdain that's so pervasive that they're happy to put it in writing. They have become emboldened, in part because they have the support of the news media. But that's the only support they have at this point. It's become too obvious to far too many people that they want to destroy us for what we believe. And now I think it's time to return the favor. Now let's get to our 5 headlines. Let's talk about something that keeps business owners up at night, managing finances. If your current system feels about as useful as a chocolate teapot, I've got a solution that'll make you wonder how you ever lived without it. It's called Ramp. Ramp is a corporate card and spend management software designed to help you save time and money. Picture this. You give every employee a card, but you're in complete control. You can even set limits tighter than my patience for small talk. Plus, say goodbye to wasting your life deciphering expense reports at month's end. Ramp categorizes your expenses in real time and collects receipts automatically. You'll be closing your books 8 times faster. But Ramp isn't just about saving time, it's about cold, hard cash. The average business saves 5% in their first year with Ramp. Not to mention, Ramp is so easy to use. Get started in less than 15 minutes, whether you have 5 employees or 5,000. And now, get $250 when you join Ramp. Just go to ramp.com/Walsh, ramp.com/Walsh. That's ramp.com/Walsh. Cards issued by Sutton Bank, member FDIC. Terms and conditions apply. All right, we're starting to get some news about who is going to be in this upcoming Trump administration. DailyWire reports President-elect Donald Trump announced late on Sunday night that he was naming his former acting director of U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement to be the new border czar. Trump said in a statement, quote, "I'm pleased to announce that the former ICE director and stalwart on border control, Tom Homan, will be joining the Trump administration in charge of our nation's borders, the border czar, including but not limited to the southern border, the northern border, all maritime and aviation security." He continued, "I've known Tom for a long time, and there's nobody better at policing and controlling our borders. Likewise, Tom Homan will be in charge of all deportation of illegal aliens back to their country of origin. Congratulations to Tom. I have no doubt he'll do a fantastic and long-awaited job." So this is one of the first official positions that Trump has filled. And this is going to be the person who, and the good thing is here that Trump is actually explaining what the border czar is supposed to do, which is already. So already he's done. He's not even the president yet, and he's already done more in that regard than Biden ever did. Because, as we know, famously he put Kamala in the position of border czar, but never told us what exactly that entails. What is she doing exactly? Turns out she did nothing. Well, except facilitate the flood of more illegal immigrants into the country. So she did that. But in this case, we're being told exactly what he's going to do. And that includes he is going to be heading up the mass deportation program. So who is this guy? And if you're not familiar with him, not sure whether you should be excited about this appointment or not, I think there are 2 clips that should tell you everything you need to know about this guy. First, here he is in a hearing somewhat recently, getting interrogated by AOC. Let's watch that.
Zero tolerance was interpreted as the policy that separated children from their
If I get arrested for DUI and I have a young child in the car, I'm going to be separated. When I was a police officer in New York and I arrested a father for domestic violence, I separated that father
Mr.
from his
Holman,
family.
with all due respect, legal asylees are not charged with any crime.
When you're into the country illegally, it's violation 8 United States Code 1325.
Seeking asylum is legal.
If you want to seek asylum and go through the port of entry, do it the legal way. The Attorney General of the United States has made that clear.
Okay. Mr. Chair, the memo is submitted to the record for review.
She's got nothing at the end. Okay. Nothing at all. Nothing at all. Because, of course, what he said there is very simple, very correct. Really basic point about the separation of families, that anytime somebody commits a crime, they're going to be separated from their family, at least for some period of time. This is what enforcing the law pretty much always entails. Then you never hear anyone lament that fact, or you might lament it. I mean, as he points out, if somebody commits a DUI, they're going to go to jail. You might lament the fact that they're being taken away from their kids. It's a sad thing. It's sad for the kids. But nobody would blame the court system for separating. Nobody would say that, well, because this person has a kid, they just shouldn't go to jail at all. They should be allowed to do whatever they want. They shouldn't be punished for DUI because they have a kid. If anything, it's the opposite. You're like, well, this is all the more reason to punish them. You have a kid and you're acting that way. So very basic point there, but true and correct and important. And then AOC says, well, they haven't committed a crime. They're asylees. They're seeking asylum. And you notice, of course, what's happened here. It's very obvious that the rebranding of illegal immigrants. Okay, we went from they were illegal immigrants, and then it became undocumented immigrants. And then there's really been an update in the branding, the euphemisms used by people like AOC. Yeah, they still call them undocumented, but now you don't even hear that term used as often, because instead they just call them all asylum seekers or asylees, as AOC said. So that's the rebranding now. This is really what AOC believes. This is not a straw man. This is what she believes. What she would say is that every single illegal immigrant in this country is an asylum seeker. Just by the very fact that they came here, even if they never seek asylum in any kind of official legal way. If somebody came here as an illegal immigrant 15 years ago and has just been living here and, working a job that they shouldn't be working because it belongs to an American citizen, they're an asylum seeker. They never actually sought asylum in any official way. They never declared themselves. They never did. But they're automatically an asylum seeker because they are here. That's the way that she sees it. That's the way the left sees it. Tom Homan is saying, no, it turns out that there's actually an official process for seeking asylum. And you have to go through that process. And if you don't, then that's what makes you an illegal immigrant. So that tells you something about this guy's, approach. And there's also this. That was Exhibit 1. Here's Exhibit 2. This is from 60 Minutes a couple of months ago.
We have seen one estimate that says it would cost $88 billion to deport 1 million people a year.
I don't know if that's accurate or not.
Is that what American taxpayers should expect?
What price do you put on national security? Is that worth it?
Is there a way to carry out mass deportation without separating families?
Of course there is. Families can be deported together.
So in other words, yeah, you should be excited about this appointment. This is exactly the kind of guy that you need in the government. This is the kind of guy you need in leadership positions. It's the kind of guy you need handling a problem like this. Everything about it, even the way, just the look, everything. It's exactly what you need. It should be a guy, even before you hear him say anything, you can just kind of look at this guy, you're like, yeah, that's the guy. That's the guy we want on this. And then you hear what he has to say, and it makes it very clear. Trump's border czar is the guy who said that, the way to prevent family separations is to deport the whole family together, which is true. It's exactly right. This is the appropriate way to handle family separations. If you don't want to separate the family, well, send them all back. That's how you solve problem solved. And that is the appropriate way to handle family separations. It's common sense. But it's the kind of thing that until Trump, no Republican official would ever say. And more importantly, it's a policy that they would never enact. And this is exactly what we need. We need someone who will coolly and dispassionately apply the law. right? Enough of the compassionate conservative types who are so easily manipulated by airheads like AOC. We also don't need, on the other end of that spectrum, maybe some kind of like crusading firebrand type. It's not really what you need. I mean, I'd take that. I'd prefer that over the former. But you don't even really need that either. You just need a guy who's competent and serious, no nonsense. A guy who's like, look, here's the law. We're going to enforce it. That's it. That's all. That's what the law is. So you're going to deport 20 million illegal immigrants? Well, they're all here and they shouldn't be. However many are here is how many we're going to deport. I don't know. If it's 20 million, that's the number. Here's the good news. Once we deport them all, then we don't have to worry. Then if that makes you sad, once you deport all of them, then you don't have to deport anybody anymore. So that's the good news. I will say this, and I don't want to hype things up too much ahead of time, but if Trump staffs his whole administration with guys like this, then his second term could be one of the great presidential terms in American history. If he does that, if these are the kinds of guys that are put into these positions. And when I say these kinds of guys, what do I mean? I mean, these are guys they're not neocons, they're not milquetoast centrists, they're not liberals. They're also not attention-seeking blowhards, right? Who seem like they're trying to parlay the job into a cable news gig. You don't need those kinds of people either. This is someone who's both competent and totally unconcerned with the left-wing narrative. A competent, no-nonsense guy who doesn't care what the liberals are whining about. Just they don't need to be performative. They don't need to be anything like that. You'd prefer if they're not. They don't need to love the attention. They don't need anything like that. You just need someone who cares about getting the job done, is going to get it done, and if the left is crying about it, they don't care. We need a whole administration of guys just like that. So, off to a good start, we can certainly say. All right, left-wing students on campuses are struggling to cope with the election results, but some colleges are finding ways to help them through this difficult time. Watch.
As ballots continue to be counted, Chico State is offering support to students who might be feeling some distress if it didn't go their way.
Well, Action News Now reporter Sade Poulin she actually spoke with a university counselor and shows us why the service is being offered now.
Chico State's president, Stephen Perez, announced Wednesday morning that students that are upset about the election results have a safe space here on campus through mental health services. Perez says although some may be excited about the outcome, marginalized communities may be feeling especially heavy post-election. The senior director for student affairs, Dawn Frank, tells me that depending on the administration in office, potential policy changes could affect those communities more than others. This includes people of color, the LGBTQ+ community, undocumented students, and women.
Some of those communities following the election have a lot of fear, have a lot of grief, and a lot of uncertainty of what comes next. So we wanted to make sure that we created safe spaces.
Frank says that the university offered counseling services for the last two presidential elections, including in 2020 when Joe Biden was elected. She says in the last few years, the university has seen the need.
For a lot of the folks, again, because of the fear and the uncertainty of what's coming, this can be a traumatic moment for them. And so I would argue that counseling is not a dramatic response, but that it's an appropriate response. And this is a healing-centered campus. Some of it was more formalized counseling services, and others were really just more intentional interactions. Come in and, do meditation coloring sheets.
Frank tells me that the university is offering the support after several students request.
Yes, you heard that right. Coloring books. So they're giving therapeutic coloring books to students who are traumatized by Trump getting elected. I think that's a great idea, actually. It might surprise you to hear me say that, but if I was running a college campus, I would also offer coloring books to any students who are feeling sad, so that anyone who came to get a coloring book could be immediately expelled. And this is how a college campus would work under my direction. We'd offer all kinds of services. We'd offer, the wokest services imaginable. But the catch is that you'll be expelled if you request them. So it's like an elaborate, it's like a booby trap. And if you fall into it, if you come and ask for it. And by the way, I'd still give you the coloring book. I wouldn't be lying, but you'd be given the coloring book, and then you'd be told that you can leave the campus and go do your coloring somewhere else because you're banned for life. Plenty has been said about snowflake college students. There probably isn't much that needs to be added to that point, but I will just say that this is, again, the problem with living in a society where people go to therapy to deal with every uncomfortable experience or inconvenience that they encounter, because then suddenly everything is traumatizing. Everything is a trauma. I mean, you heard it there, the word trauma. These are traumatized. Well, let me tell you this. You are not traumatized by the election. Okay, actually, not everything is a trauma. You might be sad. You might be worried. You might be upset. You might be mad. You shouldn't be any of those things in response to Trump winning, but you might be. And that's fine. If you want an election to go a certain way, it goes the other way. Being disappointed, that's reasonable. It's a reasonable emotional response, disappointment. It's not trauma, though. And a lot of people these days, especially younger people, just cannot draw a distinction between an uncomfortable emotional experience and trauma. They just can't distinguish between the two. They really can't. It's kind of like, I was talking to a doctor recently, and I was asking him about the something I've always wondered about with the the pain scale that they have, the 1 to 10. If you go to a doctor, you go to an emergency room, they'll ask you how much pain you're feeling, and they say on a scale of 1 to 10. And I've always wondered about it because not only is it subjective, obviously, but I have to imagine that these days, when so many people are weak and prone to hysteria, that and just dramatic and theatrical, and they love being victims. I mean, not everybody, but there are plenty of people like that. You must get a lot of patients who come in claiming that their pain is a 10. You must hear a lot of 10s. You must, when you, as a nurse or a doctor, you must hear a lot of 9s and 10s all the time from people. When in reality, it's like a 3 or 4. One of the many reasons I could never be a doctor or a nurse, because many reasons. One of them is this, that every person who tells me, oh, my pain's a 9 or 10, I'm like, is it really? I don't think it is. It's not that bad. Come on. I mean, if you're shot in the stomach or something and actively bleeding, then maybe I'll buy a 9 or 10. But other than that, I'm just not buying it. People exaggerate is the point. And the doctor I was talking to said that, this is an issue. People do exaggerate. He also said that the whole pain scale number thing is not, they're looking more at your vitals and other physical clinical signs than the number that you assign. So I'm not even sure what the point of the number is. Anyway, the point is that something similar happens with emotional pain, I think. Only it's much worse. Because the emotional equivalent of a stubbed toe is now categorized as trauma. And so I'm not like joking or being hyperbolic at all when I say that these people, especially these kids on college campuses that are, going to the counseling center because they truly have lost the ability to distinguish between emotional discomfort and trauma. The idea that something could make you emotionally uncomfortable and yet not be traumatic is offensive to them. They're traumatized by the very suggestion that they aren't traumatized. And this is all part of the therapeutic industry, and this is the mentality that it's instilled in so many people. All right, here's a guy who's certainly traumatized. DailyWire reports about Barack Obama. It says Barack Obama is nervous about his legacy after President-elect Donald Trump's historic victory over Vice President Kamala Harris in the 2024 election. Former president's biographer said, he has been and remains extremely concerned and nervous about his historical legacy, said David Garrow, who wrote the biography Rising Star, The Making of Barack Obama. That has certainly taken a big hit with Trump once again triumphing. The conclusion for Democrats is that they've got to dispense with these people from the past, including Hillary Clinton too, and move to a new generation of figures who are not in the AOC club at all. Well, I will say Obama should be nervous about his legacy because it is in shambles. It is destroyed, right? It's over. The Obama legacy is finished. It's completely finished. And here's what's great about Obama's legacy. This is what I love about it. This is what I love about the situation that he finds himself in. It's that no matter how you look at it, no matter which side you're on, his legacy is garbage. This is something that now both sides will have to agree. His legacy is garbage. So if you're a conservative, then you can clearly see the truth, which is that Obama was, potentially the worst president in United States history, maybe outdone by Biden, but we'll have to see. I mean, you need a little bit more time. We know that Biden was a terrible president. Was he the worst? Really depends on what happens in the future, because you have to have time to see the long-term effects of the presidency. And with Obama, we've had that time, and we've seen the long-term effects, and they were catastrophic. So he was, as far as we know right now, the worst president in history. He destroyed the country, destroyed our culture. He was an abject failure in every respect. He made America more fractured, less stable, less prosperous. He was a destructive force economically, socially, culturally. That's what you would say, what you would correctly say if you're on the right. If you're on the left, you'd probably object to most of that analysis. But from your perspective on the left, the Obama years led directly to Trump and to the eventual undoing of the entire Democrat Party. I mean, the entire Democrat Party is now it's going to have to be rebuilt from the ground up. Like Obama's legacy, it is in shambles. And if the Democrat Party after Obama is in shambles, then Obama's legacy is in shambles, because this is Obama's Democrat Party. There's no denying it. Which means that he failed even by their estimation. He failed in a different way, but he still failed. So who's left? Who would view Obama as a success at this point? Who could, in the year 2024, as we head into 2025, after this past election, who would look at Obama now and say, wow, that was fantastic. That was great. That worked out great. Who would say that? If anything, on the left, they'd be less likely to say that now. Certainly on the right, we'd say this, but at this point, you couldn't possibly look at that as any kind of great success. His legacy is completely and totally destroyed, and could not have happened to a more deserving person. All right, let's talk about something that affects all of us: taxes. The October 15th deadline is passed, and if you're not prepared, you could be in for a world of hurt. Do you owe back taxes? Are your returns still unfiled? Did you miss the deadline to file for an extension? Well, now that we're past October 15th, the IRS is probably gearing up for some aggressive enforcement. Trust me, you don't want to be on their radar. We're talking wage garnishments, frozen bank accounts, or even property seizures. It's not pretty. But before you start panicking, there's still hope. Tax Network USA has helped taxpayers save over $1 billion in tax debt and filed over 10,000 tax returns. These guys specialize in reducing tax burdens for working Americans just like you. Look, I get it. Dealing with the IRS is about as fun as a root canal, but ignoring the problem won't make it go away. So here's what you need to do. Don't wait any longer. For a complimentary consultation, call today at 1-800-958-1000 or visit their website at tnusa.com/Walsh. Their experts will walk you through a few simple questions to see how much you can save. That's 1-800-958-1000 or visit tnusa.com/Walsh today. Don't let the IRS take advantage of you. Get the help you need with Tax Network USA. Am I Racist became the biggest documentary of the decade in theaters, and now it's streaming exclusively on DailyWire Plus. If you saw Am I Racist in theaters, first of all, thank you, congratulations, you're part of history, but there's more you haven't seen. We've got a deleted scene where I somehow ended up as my beloved children's book character, Johnny the Walrus. You need to see that. It won't make any sense until you see it. Along with behind-the-scenes footage where I show you how we pulled off the biggest troll in history on the left. And yes, it was all real, but the only way to see it is with a Daily Wire Plus membership. If you're not a member yet, now's the time. Go to dailywire.com/subscribe. Use code Trump to get 47% off a new annual membership. Now let's get to our daily cancellation. As we discussed during this segment last week, the left has tried different coping mechanisms in response to Kamala's humiliating defeat on Tuesday. They've tried screaming hysterically in their cars. They've tried swearing off all sexual relations with men. They've tried shaving their heads. They've tried therapeutic coloring books. None of that seems to have assuaged their anguish. And now they're trying a new strategy. Kamala voters on TV and in social media have declared that the only path forward is to cut off all contact with friends and family members who voted for Trump. A child psychiatrist from Yale made this exact recommendation on MSNBC.
Are people challenged with the idea of how do you interact with people who you know voted for this, right? If you are an LGBTQ person and you know someone in your family voted essentially against your rights, or you're a woman knowing that, this man was calling people the B word. J.D. Vance was literally calling Kamala Harris the trash and said, we're going to take out the trash. I know a lot of black women were incredibly triggered by that. And if you then meet somebody and they voted for the people who called you trash, or if you're Puerto Rican, and someone voted that way, do you recommend, just from a psychological standpoint, being around them? We got the holidays coming up.
So I love that you asked this question because, there is a push, I think just a societal norm that if somebody is your family, that they are entitled to your time. And I think the answer is absolutely not. So if you are going into a situation where you have family members, where you have close friends who have voted in ways that are against you, like what you said, against your livelihood, and it's completely fine to not be around those people and to tell them why, to say, I have a problem with the way that you voted because it went against my very livelihood, and I'm not going to be around you this holiday. I need to take some space for me.
So Joy Reid wants to know how someone is supposed to interact with a family member who voted differently. This is the kind of question you only ask if you have the maturity and intelligence of a brain-damaged lizard. But for normal people, it's not confusing or difficult. You interact with your family members by speaking to them. I'd recommend starting with hello or, a similar greeting. If you want to avoid talking politics with them, that's fine. I personally enjoy debating politics with my family, although we agree on the fundamentals. I don't have any Kamala voters in my family. But, if you don't want to debate it, you don't have to. Your family is still your family. But that's not what this Yale psychiatrist says. According to her, your family is only your family if they agree with you politically. This is the kind of insight we can expect from Ivy League mental health experts. She is recommending isolation, alienation, and the severing of support systems. Okay, that's what a psychiatrist is recommending to people who are already obviously mentally unstable, which is like a cardiologist advising someone to elevate their cholesterol levels to like 300. I mean, it's the opposite of what you're supposed to be telling people to do, obviously. And if you're wondering why I'm extremely skeptical of the psychiatry profession, well, this woman is exhibit 1 million, approximately. A lot of people seem to have taken her advice, however. Here's a guy on TikTok giving his followers some self-care tips in the wake of the election results.
Well, good afternoon, you beautiful. Just a reminder that going no contact with somebody or people, family members, friends, because they voted for Trump and against your rights and your freedoms, in my opinion, is one of the ultimate forms of self-care. That's about it. Like, if someone wants you to have less rights and freedoms, then how the f*** is that? How is that person your family member or a friend? Why would you want to spend Thanksgiving with them? Why would you want to buy them gifts? Like, if they don't give a f*** about your rights and freedoms, then how the f*** do they give a f*** about you? That's it.
So some incredible wisdom. If they don't give an F about your rights and freedoms, then how the F do they give an F about you? I think he was quoting Aristotle there. Never mind the fact that none of these people can possibly explain which of their rights are threatened by Trump. What right specifically has Trump promised to end? Which right? Now, they can't answer that. They can't even begin to answer it. That ultimately is why they want to cut off contact with their Trump-supporting family members. It's not that those family members are rude or abusive to them. It's that those family members may ask them to explain their political position, which is something they absolutely cannot do, and they know they can't do it. That explains this post from somebody named Derek over on X. He wrote, quote, I have cut ties with my MAGA father and sister. I will never, ever speak to them again. I will spit on their graves. If you still hang out with your friends or family that votes for fascism, you need a long look in the mirror. Yes, Derek says that if you are not spitting on the graves of your own family, you need to take a long look in the mirror. You need to stop and consider what went wrong in your life that you aren't disowning your family and spitting on their graves. That's what all the cool kids are doing. That's what all the totally well-adjusted and normal human beings are doing. I think the point has been made, but I will only reiterate that Derek here cannot explain how Trump is a fascist or what fascism is or why he's opposed to it, whatever it is. He has no clue. And he certainly doesn't want to be asked that question at Thanksgiving. He'd rather betray his own blood, stab them in the back, than have his own intellectual vacuousness exposed. Unfortunately for Derek, a little too late for that. We haven't even gotten to the worst example yet. Here's a Kamala voter attacking her own children for disagreeing with her dumb political views.
So here's a problem that I have dealing with my MAGA sons. They get very, very offended if I say that I think that they are ignorant to some things because of their support for this rapist and felon. But here's the thing. I have two choices when I try to understand why they would support an abhorrent human that goes against every value I try to instill in them. Here's my two choices. I can believe that you are ignorant, or I can believe that you are evil. Ignorant is the kinder choice.
So just to review, this horrific witch of a woman decided to make a TikTok video publicly accusing her own sons of either being ignorant or evil because they voted for someone she doesn't like. And what are they ignorant of? What information do you have, lady, about Trump that they don't have? Can you enlighten them? Can you share these salient details with them? I'm sure you've tried, but the problem is that you believe a bunch of nonsense that you heard from MSNBC. And your sons are too respectful to inform you that you are a pretentious dimwit with your head stuck up your ass. Unfortunately, you aren't my mom, so I can say that to you. They won't say it, I'm guessing, because they care about their family, which is more than I can say about you. Now, let me end this with just one last thought for any leftist considering cutting off contact with family members who committed the sin of having a mind and opinions of their own. You're free to make that choice, of course, but if you do, please don't bother us a few years from now with some tearful follow-up video crying about how lonely and sad you are. Okay? Please don't do that. Because none of us will have any sympathy for you. None of us will care. You know what? Actually, we'll laugh in your face. We will laugh at your pain right in your face. Because you're choosing it. You are choosing to be isolated and alone. I mean, that woman in that video, she's going to die alone. Her family's going to hate her. She's going to be in a nursing home, just dying alone with no one to even visit her. And if they do, they're going to do so begrudgingly because they don't want to spend any time with her. And she's going to be really sad about that. But you know what? I don't care. Your pain means nothing. You deserve it. To return from a theme from last week, that's justice. You deserve that. You are disowning and disavowing the only people who love and care about you unconditionally. Now, for most of the people in these videos and most of these leftist types who would want to disown their families, like the rest of us don't want to be around you or talk to you or even get to know you because you're incredibly unpleasant and insufferable. Going back to that woman in the video, like no other person in the world, I guarantee you, no one wants to be around that woman. She has no real friends. Either friends that she has hate her guts and talk about her behind her back. No one wants to be around a person like that. No way. You do have a family, though. And your family loves you anyway. Right? If you push them away, you'll be left with no one. You'll be miserable and alone and alienated from the only people who ever cared about you or wanted to be around you. And you'll deserve it. But hey, at least you'll have made a statement about Trump. A statement that will have no impact on the world outside of your own life, which you will have made even more miserable than it already was. And that is why you will be at that point, and are now already today, canceled. That'll do it for the show today. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Talk to you tomorrow. Have a great day. Godspeed.
Today on The Ben Shapiro Show, President Trump makes some excellent picks for his cabinet. The DailyWire investigative team uncorks an insane story, and Democrats balance between hysteria and introspection. That's today on The Ben Shapiro Show. Give it a listen.